Okay, so Tim, welcome.
Hi, Brad. Good to
Hi,
see you.
good to see you too. Yeah, thank you for coming on to discuss your art, your portfolio, and and yourself.
Well, indeed, if it is art or whatever it might be, but we'll discuss that in more detail. But yeah, looking forward to delving a bit deeper and maybe just sort of pressing a few buttons that move me on a little bit, which should be great.
Yeah, so I mean, you're looking, I guess, to perhaps pursue that more artistic path with your work, right? And give your work a
Yes,
bit more depth and
I
meaning.
mean,
Yeah,
perhaps if I start with a little bit of background of sort of
great,
how I got to
perfect.
where we are now. Um, I've been a photographer. I've been taking photographs for, well, I don't know, 55 years,
Yeah,
50 years. Um, Started out with film, as people my age did, send them off to the chemist, wait a week for them to come back, see if you've got something, by which time you've completely forgotten what settings you used. Or so progress in the film era was very slow or very expensive, but nonetheless made good progress over 3 or 4 years, mainly when I was at college. Really enjoyed it. Kids came along, got into work, photography rather, took a back seat until digital came in. And it took me a while, but eventually I bought a D90, Nikon D90, and the image quality it jumped forward so quickly. Um, so I stuck with that for a while, and it was really the next big leap was lockdown, when I spent the time just looking at different YouTube videos. And I think art of photography was one I started with, and then they led me into Tom Heaton. And I thought, well, if I look through all these people, I'll glean the secret of taking fantastic pictures. I dare say I learned a bit, but the secret isn't discovered that way. But I upgraded my gear, got some better lenses, slightly better camera. I know it's not all in the camera, but if you have a decent bit of kit, then you've got good tools to do the job. And I certainly don't think I will progress beyond the one I've got now for some considerable time. Um, got out a bit more, taking pictures, experimented with some of the new ideas I picked up from these videos. And oh yeah, there was a certain Brad Cars videos that I picked up on around about that sort of time as well. And yeah, progressed reasonably quick. Um, but then I think your probing as much as anything made me start thinking about what am I doing this for? What am I trying to achieve? And yes, taking a good picture that goes in my portfolio is a primary driver. But what beyond that? Do you want to share them with people? Do you want to use them for publicity, make money out of them? Well, I certainly don't need to make money out of them. I'm retired from work. It's a hobby. So it's more a matter of fulfilling that creative urge, and not being very good with my hands. I can't really draw very well. This was a good option to pick up the camera and drive it forward that way. But then I look at the pictures and I think a lot of them are a great record of moments. But do they say something more? Do they go beyond that? One or two of them do, but not all. Um, and they don't have a style. I've never pigeonholed myself. And I've sort of take what catches my eye. Obviously, landscape, rural image, nature. I think when I started out originally, I wanted to take nature pictures, and my first camera was a Zenith E, which was like the size of a house brick, um, and the weight of one, and a 400 millimeter lens, which was an awful manual thing. You had to focus it, shut down the aperture, take the picture. It really needed bright light to get anything out of it. And I ended up with lots of little specks in the distance and realized that actually wildlife photography is about having a hide and remote controlled cameras and getting up close. And I just, even a 400 mm lens wasn't going to do that for me. So I kind of abandoned it and never really went back to it, I will, if I get an opportunity, I'll take a picture of a bird or an animal if it presents itself. But it's not become the area I've chosen to pursue specifically. I do like black and white. I do struggle a bit with color contrast because I'm colorblind. I think that has something to do with it. I've never felt confident with colors, but every now and then I will see nice colors and pick them up. So, golds and blues and that sort of thing. If I see those, I'll grab them. But I think I see other people's pictures and think I wouldn't have seen that as a picture because I'm just not seeing, and even looking at it, I'm not seeing what you're seeing. I'm not getting that vibrant color jumping out at me. So shape and form is probably more the direction I head in, and where I feel comfortable and on a level playing field with everybody else, I suppose. So black and white does sort of draw me to some degree. So yeah, that's about where I'm at. Just trying to move on from simply recording and documenting to actually maybe being a bit more creative, having putting my ideas into it, and getting a bit more feeling into some of these pictures. Maybe stories, as you often mention, that sort of thing. But yeah, just trying to get a bit more mood, something that draws the viewer in a bit more, captures a bit more of the spirit of the thing than just good light on a given moment. I mean, light has always been a key thing, and that was
Mm.
something I learned first time round with film photography. Was if you haven't got light, you haven't got a picture most of the time. But you do that, and then you've kind of got to move on beyond that and use the light to create something even more. And that's, I guess, what I'm looking to try and achieve now.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for sharing all of that, Tim. There's a few things that my attention picked up on, but I'll start with that recent thing about light and there being something more. And you left a comment on my YouTube video yesterday about maybe creating maybe the fact that I think you mentioned something around along the lines of maybe you're not creating, but merely is the wrong word, but you're not creating, but choosing to record instead. And I just want to explore. Let me just see what that comment said. Yeah, a recording process which is more practical than creative. So, what would perhaps a creative photograph look like to you then, in terms of something that's merely just recording, presenting?
I think it has to have a feel that goes beyond the subject, so that you creates an emotion, creates some reaction, as opposed to that's a well executed picture of whatever it is. And I said I feel comfortable calling myself a photographer now. I can work a camera competently. I can take sharp pictures that are correctly exposed. I can do things with the camera to throw out depth of field and um, long exposures and create effects. But I feel that's just using the equipment to do clever stuff, and it's not capturing the spirit and the soul of what's in front of me. And I think that's really what I would like to sort of move towards. And the next step for me is to try to capture the spirit of whatever subject I choose to adopt. And I think this this book we've been referring to, creating a portfolio, has helped in that. I think in order to do that, you probably do need to initially, anyway, narrow down the subjects that you take photographs of, so that you take a deeper dive into that narrower area. I've always been reluctant to contain what I take pictures of, but I do think perhaps that's a necessary step, and then reopen it out once I've gone past that blockage, as it were.
Yeah, well, there's two things there for me, and one of them, which we'll touch upon later because I've noted it down somewhere, is that I mean, I've overlaid your portfolio that you submitted onto the screen before, so anybody watching has had a look through, and I've obviously spent some time having a look through. I wrote down the word experimentative, where there's a theme of, you know, you're experimenting with photography, you're experimenting with creativity, and you mentioned in the comment you left me yesterday, you know, about the kind of your refusal to kind of pigeonhole yourself and put yourself in a box. And I just wanted to kind of draw upon that later. And you mentioned it there about perhaps it is maybe time to refine and maybe to set yourself some containments within photography that could allow those things to evolve into whatever direction I guess your intuition is leading you to allow them to. But we'll touch upon that later because I also wanted to just draw back a few chapters in what you went through there, because you mentioned about seeing. I mean, you've given me a lot, so my head's constantly kind of going off.
Yeah,
And
sorry, I blurted it all out
that's
in
all right.
one
It's
deluge.
perfect. I like to just whatever comes most strongly to me, then explore that. So the one thing was when you talked about seeing, and particularly around colors, and your eyes not seeing the vibrancy. That to me is a very, I mean, color draws me. I do love color, but beyond color, in my own work, it's the feelings, it's the emotion, particularly things like stillness, for example, which creates a theme in my portfolio. And it sounds a little bit to me like that's kind of where you're trying to get to, where you're trying to go is to, and you know, it's kind of like creating from here rather than here. So yeah, you see on one level with the eyes. And somebody asked me yesterday actually about my work and what it is that I'm, you know, looking for when I'm out. And I pointed to this, and it's kind of this feeling of, well, I'm trying to, you know, to get down beyond this and get into here, into the heart, to find out what I'm feeling beyond what I'm seeing, if that makes sense. And I would I would be curious from your perspective, out of the portfolio of photographs that you have submitted there, which of those would you say have that more heart reaction as opposed to a logical, technical, thoughtful approach?
Trying to think. I mean, the one of the autumn tree in the mist. I think that's one where I really felt I'd sort of um, got close to what I was trying to achieve. Um, but I think I picked up on your comment about stillness, and I think that is perhaps the difference, where I'm thinking in terms of subject rather than emotion. And as you say, if one goes out with in mind photographing tranquility or peace or something of that sort, that perhaps would take one in that direction. There's one of Llyn Mogul at Tallaght Lyn, which is has got that, I think. That one. Um, and it's the other thing that one's got, which I picked up on when I was going through trying to create this portfolio, is that some of my favourite landscape pictures have no sky in them. And I had never even thought about it before. I'm not even
Mm,
sure why that's the case. The sky can be pretty boring if it's just plain white or plain grey, as it
yeah.
often is. It's not often that you get Ansel Adams type clouds that you can
Mm,
populate that area with. So it tends to be dead space, I suppose. But it also contains the eye and brings it into the landscape, rather than wandering off into the sky. It's sort of, if you have sky even in one corner, it's like an escape route that the eye tries to
yeah.
move towards.
Yeah.
That said, I mean, I took this thinking great reflections, lovely colours, but I wasn't thinking capture the peace or capture the tranquility of
Mm,
the scene. And I think maybe that's a thought process I need to get in the habit of using more, deciding what that theme is going to be and applying it when I'm behind the camera rather than thinking this is a good subject and good light, which is about as far as I've tended to get so far.
mm. And that in itself requires a whole, perhaps, a whole different journey as well in many ways, because it also involves then, and I think particularly in our Western world, we tend to rule with these tend to be our first port of call, let's, yeah, and rightly so, years of, surviving and thinking and, evolving in this modern world has rightly put us into that. So that journey now that perhaps you wish to be pursuing is more about, the introspective journey of maybe trying to dial into those feelings more so than the logical kind of side of things. And I
Yeah.
don't know how easy that is for you, Tim, to do that.
I certainly have those feelings. I just think I'd never quite made the connection between
Mm,
emotion and taking a photograph. As I say, up to now, it's been a process. It's working the camera, and it's here's something that's well lit and looks nice. Capture it correctly, and you've got a good picture.
yeah,
You kind of have, but you still not got an exceptional picture because there's still something lacking. There's that emotion is missing from them. I think one could say there is, as say, emotion as peace, tranquility in this shot, but that was just part and parcel of that day and what it felt like to be there. I mean, you can almost hear the stillness coming off that
sure.
picture, and that's how it felt there, which is
Mm,
really a strange experience when you're actually in a massive, wide open space in the
yeah.
mountains, and there's no wind, no sound, no
Mm,
movement. So I think that does come through in that picture, but
absolutely. I feel it. Yeah.
it's not something I was setting out to put into it.
Mm,
And I think that's the difference. I need to turn it around perhaps and approach it with that in mind, whether it's stillness or wild raging storm.
sure.
Either way, go and capture the wild rage or capture the peace and stillness.
Mm,
Not worry so much about is it an interesting subject. So if you can capture the essence of it,
sure.
then
Well,
you're
yeah.
starting to make something that you're creating something rather than just recording it, which, as I say, I think is what I've been doing up to now.
Well, I would say that there's definitely a handful of photographs in here that kind of I see a theme with the photographs that is beyond just a representational recording of a place. And there was this one. There was also, let me I'll just go back through. I mean, this one stood out to me. I know you've mentioned to me a few times that you like architecture, and there was something that
Yeah.
I really liked about this one, but it's kind of
Okay.
outside of the this theme that I was drawing upon now. So let me just go through them. So there was this one as well. Again,
Yeah.
very still, a very quiet, very tranquil scene that kind of fits in with the Talyllyn photograph as well. There was this one, another fleeting moment of beautiful
That's a
light.
very recent one. Yeah.
I remember you shared this one with me in the group, I think.
Yes, I think I posted one, or if it wasn't that one, it was a similar one that I took that morning. It was just one of those crazy mornings where wherever you pointed the camera, there was a shot.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I sat there for half an hour and composed that particular shot. I was machine gunning a bit,
yeah.
and that was one of the ones that caught my eye that really worked.
Mm. And sometimes it requires that approach too, to not be so thoughtful and to be a bit more impulsive and reactive, and that can
I
have
think
beautiful
when
effects
you've
as
got
well.
when you've got great conditions like that, yeah, you just want to get as much of it on film as you can, and if you're taking a reactive shot, then something sort of subconscious is
Sure.
at play, and I think you've kind of got to let that dictate what you're doing. You keep
Yeah.
the mechanics of the camera working correctly and your composition eye working, but you let something else deeper take over and just what it sees grab
Yeah.
that.
And
And
that
I
might
think
well
that's
be the
very much what
soul,
happened here.
perhaps. Yeah.
So again,
That might well be the soul taking over then, perhaps.
could be. I mean, I soul, subconscious.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's something beyond what you think about. And
Yeah. Yeah. So there was also this one. This one stood out to me as well.
yeah.
Whether that's because I love woodland as well, but no,
I, I,
it is a
it,
beautiful moment.
it was a special picture that, and weirdly, that wasn't a photo shoot. I was setting off to work. Well, I'd gone into the office for setting off to the first job of the day. I drive through these woods, and it was the mist and the tree and the colour, and I had the camera with me, and I just literally stopped, set the tripod up on the side of the road, click, jumped back in the car and drove on. And it
Mm.
took me weeks afterwards to work out which tree it was I'd taken the picture of. I sort of walked up and down that wood several times trying to work it out. Eventually I found it again. But
Yeah.
it's funny how just an instant in the car, and you see something and you want to grab it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a beautiful depth to this one. You mentioned before that there's a few that you feel have a bit more depth to
That I
them. And
felt was on a completely different level to anything I'd taken up until that point, and that
mm,
was sort of early post lockdown, I think.
yeah. So there's also this one. I like this one very much as well. This one, again, another. I feel the silence here,
I'm
and
glad you said that because I like this one, and it's one I had this one enlarged, same as the tree we looked at just before. Um, and it's a complete picture, and I think that's something that um, I don't always achieve.
mm,
I'll take the light catching an element of a picture, but occasionally I will get what I consider a complete picture. And you've got the foreground, you've got the midground, you've got the sky, you've got the composition, you've got
yeah, and
the light snaking away into the distance on the water.
yeah,
And as you say, a sort of a feel to it, a peaceful feel,
mm,
and nice light as well. So to me, that's a satisfying image that I'm pleased with, and I look at it now, I'm still happy with it. 2 or 3 years on, but it's, it was there in front of me. The light was good. I knew I was going to get something that evening, but just worked. I think those grasses in the foreground really give it a nice feel.
yeah. That's what I liked as well. That feeling of that low. I guess autumn. Was it autumn? Late autumn.
It would have been.
Light breaking across. I can just see a hint
I'm
of
trying to
colours in the
think.
background there.
Yeah, okay. It was. This is up in Scotland, Dumfries and Galloway. Um, it possibly would have been September time,
Mm, yeah,
August, September, I think, something like that. Yeah, it might have
yeah,
been September.
yeah. So we have that beautiful early autumn, mid autumn, autumn light, and it does have a real feeling to this one.
Mm.
So talk to
The
me
light
about.
up there is great.
Yeah, yeah, I'd love to get up there myself, some more, and I have plans to over the next year or so, with the view to putting on a workshop actually in Scotland. So
Mm.
yeah, definitely this is kind of giving me some inspiration to go and explore a little more. But
I
I
think
just yeah,
can I just say one thing here, which I see a lot of people going to places where they're pointed at by other photographers, and Trivan is a classic, and everyone's trying to get the waterfall in the foreground and Trivan in the background, and that never actually works terribly well. And they're trying to get Glencoe in certain conditions in the snow or at dawn.
yeah,
And actually, it doesn't really matter where you are.
mm,
This is nowhere that you're going to see in a photography book. But the light was good, the composition's okay, and it works, and that's more what I'm after than
mm,
taking pictures of the big landmarks.
Yeah.
You don't need those to create a good image, to my way of thinking. I mean, yes, you can take good pictures of those things, but I think you're leaning more back towards what I was struggling with, and you're trying to make a record, albeit maybe a better or more interesting record of a place than previous people. Whereas if you go somewhere that's not on the photographer's map and you just make an image, it doesn't matter where it is, it just stands for itself and of itself.
So what is it in that what are you trying to say in that? Is there an element of Tim wants to kind of try to do things differently? He wants to do things his way. And what is it about this photograph that,
It's back to the not following the herd.
yeah.
Um, there's one photograph that makes me scream every time I see it, and other photographers will want me lopped off at the knees for saying this, but if I see another picture of that solitary tree at Llyn, I think I really will scream. It's such a cliche to me now. I couldn't begin to go and take a picture of it. I would just be repelled by it now because it's been done so many times in so many different lights. And yes, it's a decent enough picture, but it's no longer original. And I guess originality is probably one of my key drivers.
Mm,
And yeah, following the herd is not going to achieve that.
so originality, what would you say originality is from your point of view then, if you were to kind of divulge this portfolio a little bit further? Where are the, I guess, more original you pictures in here, would you say, and why?
Okay, so if I'm completely honest, um, the beech tree in autumn, I feel is partly me, but partly being driven in that direction by what I've seen other people doing. Golden leaves, foggy day, pick out a tree, gives you the structure.
Mm,
Um, and yes, I love that picture, and no one's going to repeat that particular image, so it's original in that sense. But the idea, I don't think, is
mm,
original. Um, for originality, I would say weirdly that the one of the Irish cromlech. I don't know whether you can pull that one up. It's the black and white one. And the reason I like this is, I don't know, I get drawn to these Neolithic stone structures. And this was a particularly good one in Ireland. It's nothing like as big as it looks, but it was drizzling with rain, so we've got a very boring sky. But this lad and his dad arrived, and they were on the far side of it, and I suddenly noticed how tiny they looked because they were a way
mm,
away,
mm,
and it makes it look like bigger than Stonehenge. And this is the sort of lies you can tell with the camera. But
yeah.
I, I was just it was what I set out to do, and it worked for me. And it's the shape and the form of it, and the people in the background give it, albeit false, give it scale and make it seem bigger and more impressive than it actually was. Um, so for me, I find that a very rewarding picture. It's not one that gets a great response if I put it on social media or anything of that sort,
Mm.
but that doesn't bother me in the slightest.
Which is quite
But
interesting. Sorry, did you want to say something else then?
whatever it was, it's gone, I'm afraid.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I thought you'd finished. I think
Yeah,
we had
yeah.
a little bit of delay in the connection there. But that's something that you mentioned on the comment you left on my video yesterday, was that idea of searching outside for perhaps some approval and recognition and validation from your work. And
Mm.
you just drew upon it there about how it doesn't get great engagement when you post it. So what is it for you that kind of causes you to perhaps look more outwardly then for that recognition versus how you feel within? And I guess your comment shows that there's an imbalance there in perhaps looking outwardly too much versus looking inwardly. So why do you think that is?
I think it's a conditioned response. it's how do you measure achievement or success? In sport, it's straightforward. In life, it tends to be a lot of people measure it by money and so on. When you get into the creative realm, measuring what's successful is much more difficult. And I think we have fallen into this trap of putting things on social media and thinking it's rubbish if it only gets one like, and it's fantastic if it gets 1,000. And
Yeah.
it's not the case at all. I'm on one photography dedicated sort of social media site, and I'm convinced that an awful lot of people just click on everything in the hope that they will get clicks back,
Yeah.
and they're not applying any judgment to the images that are put up. And some of them are, to my eye, absolute waste of space, and yet they're
Mm.
getting, hundreds of likes, and you just think, what's going on? And it seems that social media is about building a following. Quality doesn't seem to be
Mm.
the primary driver. Volume and that sort of clicking on lots of other people's images so that they then look at yours and give you clicks back. Well, that's a game. It's nothing to do with art or photography or creativity. And but I think there's several people that comment on their pictures, and it's all in the sense that, well, I'm not getting many likes, and you just think, oh, it's not about likes. If you like it and you believe in it, doesn't matter how many clicks it gets. So I'm finding that I'm getting more and more sort of skeptical about photography on social media, and certainly not as a measure of quality, because I don't think that judgment process is being applied. So then you're sort of in a bit of a vacuum. You go, well, do you even need to measure it? And if you do, how do you go about it? How do you find out whether what you're producing is worthwhile or not? So I take the selfish view of, well, if I like it, that's good enough for me. If I'm getting a reward from it, if I'm lifting it into my portfolio or printing it off because I like it, then that's me happy. But then you think, well, all that creativity is just going into your own little money box and being hidden from everybody else. And surely the point of creativity is to share it with others. So there's a real sort of conflict going on within me in terms of, what am I doing it for, and what am I looking to get out of it? Am I doing it for other people? Am I doing it for me? Am I trying to share it? Am I trying to keep it to myself? And I wouldn't say that it sits in my head when I'm taking pictures, but it is behind the scenes. It's there. It's sort of a constant debate in the back of my
Mm.
mind. It's just, exactly what these pictures are for.
Mm. So two questions. Firstly, what was it that kind of initially drew you to create then?
I think I know. I always used to sort of like art and drawing, but I soon realised it wasn't. I tried it for quite a time and realised I wasn't actually particularly good at it. I like making things sort of with my hands. So when I was a kid, model making, but it went on from there, building things. So a, a pragmatic, practical sort of creation process. Um, but that's not expressive, whereas photography is more in the art area, and has that potential to be more expressive. And as I said before, I find it easier to express in images than in words. So I guess it provides that outlet for me. We don't always need to share every thought that we have in our head, but and likewise, we don't need to share every photograph we take. Some we probably just take for ourselves. But as an amateur who's not trying to make a living out of it, it does beg the question: why, and what happens to all these photographs. I mean, say I get run over by a bus tomorrow, they all just get chucked in the bin. They're not going to be turned into a book or anything. People ever going to look at them? Does that even matter? It'd be nice to have a purpose, I suppose, and I don't have that really.
So what are you trying to express? I would ask, and maybe that's different moment to moment and photograph to photograph. But what you've clearly, picked up this creative hobby uh, for for a reason to say something, to express something. But I would love to know what you think that is, and maybe what it was, and maybe what it's evolved from and evolved into.
Well, I honestly think it's as simple as a means of expression. As a kid, I was really shy, and saying things in words and what I felt about things was I found very hard, probably still do to some extent. And I kind of hope that I take a picture like that with the tree or in Mogul, and I would hope that's saying to people that I see this and it moves me, and it's moved me to create this image, and you can see it too. This is what goes on in my head when I'm presented with this kind of scene in front of me. So I think there's a degree of that, but I think also it's a arrival at a crossroads or a T junction in terms of photography, where I kind of need to be a bit clearer in my own mind where it's, if anywhere, it's going, or is does it need to be going anywhere? I mean, it's occurred to me to try and sell pictures, but I don't need to, and that brings all sorts of hassle, which I really can live without. But at the same time, I guess I would like, in an ideal world, I would like a photograph of mine to have made an impression somewhere,
Mm.
appeared in a book, or well, one of my pictures did create a big impression. I sent off a picture to the Wyonusk Foundation for their calendar, and it was some lambs sniffing the end of my fishing rod. Not a classic photograph by any means, but to the fishing world, it was sort of said spring. So that got in for March, and it was the month, literally on the calendar, the month below my photograph was the month that COVID started and the lockdown began below my picture. So I think the power of my photography might be more than I'd prepared myself for. Brought the entire globe to a standstill.
So I've just lost my train of thought now with that. Um, so the kind of idea of you being, you mentioned before when you were talking about the wish to express and to express something. Is there an element of perhaps trying to feel understood in some way? You mentioned about maybe being quite shy and withdrawn. Is this a way of sharing self-understanding, of feeling connected?
Yeah,
on a
I
different,
think
deeper
so.
level?
I think anyone who's sort of on the introverted side of life would say that that's true, and I certainly agree with it. Yeah, definitely.
So, are there photographs in your portfolio that have perhaps led you to a deeper level of self-understanding? And to me, I feel like that desire to be understood, perhaps, and you might disagree, I don't know, but to me is it points to a desire for self-understanding, to further understand who I am.
I have to say, I think I probably do disagree with you on that. I think through school life in general, work, I developed quite a reasonable understanding of who I was and what I was like and what my drivers were. But I always felt that I was people pleasing, and it bothers me that I don't want my photographs to be what I think other people would like to look at. I want them to be how I see the world and show my viewpoint. One of the things that has always been in the background is that I grew up in the country. I was fortunate in that respect, but spent most of my sort of adult life living in, well, not urban areas, but villages and surrounded by the people. But I've always felt more of a connection with the countryside, or rather, as you did with trees. For me, it's just countryside in general, farms, fields, trees, hedgerows. And they've been sort of the backdrop to my life. They were my playground, and you get to know it inside out. And it occurred to me, and the thought occurred to me first. I was probably only 12 or 13. I think I must have been a bit of a philosopher when I was sort of a youngster, because I had some strange thoughts back then. But suddenly, I think I was looking for grasshoppers in the long grass one summer, and the thought occurred to me that I'm not just living in the countryside; I'm part of it. If someone's driving along, I'm the yokel kid rummaging in the grass looking for the grasshoppers, or now as I'm older, is cutting the hedges or cutting down trees and shaping the ground around me. And so I've always felt that I'm with the countryside, I'm on the inside looking out. And that gives me perhaps a slightly different perspective and viewpoint to most people who come to the countryside to escape or as recreation or to relax. Yes, I mean, I get all that, but I've always mentally been the person who is in the countryside and has a realistic view of the trees and the animals and the creatures and the plants and what they do, what they're called, when they come out, the passing of seasons. But I've not actually moved that into creating a portfolio or directing my photography specifically in that way. But I kind of feel that it drives quite a lot of the pictures I take from behind a sort of a subconscious level. That my viewpoint is perhaps different to most other people's, and therefore should have a value, because I'm saying, well, have you looked at it from this angle rather than just as somewhere to come and play or whatever? It's quite a hard, subtle point to express, but hopefully I'm getting it across that, if you're a countryman, there are lots of them about. Your approach to taking pictures of the countryside is different. I mean, I see quite a few YouTube photographers who say, "Oh, here's a picture. This is a lovely picture. I don't know what that plant's called, and I don't know what type of tree that is, but it looks great." And I think there's value in that, because you come in and you're just going, "Well, that looks nice. That's fine." I'm looking at it and going, "Well, I know exactly what that plant is, and I know what it's going to do in a month's time, and I know what lives in it, and they're kind of long-term friends to me that I've grown up with." And that's probably coloured how I view scenes and landscapes as much as anything.
Yeah, I think there's real, the way that you just elaborated on that point about the countryside outside looking in, I think there's beauty in that, and also real power from what I would, say to be an artistic merit, theme, to have that personal connection to the potential of a project or theme, and how that might emerge. I don't know, but you know, I can feel your passion when you talk about the countryside, and having met you a few times and spent days with you now in the countryside, cutting down trees, don't tell anybody.
It was a dead one. You're all right.
Yeah. I felt your genuine connection, the depth of your connection, which I know you said ties back to your childhood. I know you left the countryside to live in a more built up area, but there's a real depth of purpose and passion and understanding and resonance with that inside out approach to the countryside. So potentially there could be some kind of, you know, portfolio idea there, project idea there for you to explore, and to explore with those, a clear desire, from what I can tell, for you to give other people a bit more of an understanding of what it's like to be a part of that. So it's not such a fleeting visit to the countryside for some people to just come and document the beauty, but perhaps there's a desire in you to educate and to help other people to understand not just you, but the countryside. And maybe it's to understand the countryside through you, and to understand you through the countryside as a part of that. I think there's definite power in that desire to be understood that you mentioned.
I agree. I think there's definitely something there that needs to be unlocked. And I think what I perhaps need to do is set myself a project to just dip a toe into that and see where it leads me. I mean, I did start, and I have a collection of photographs of just farming scenes. It was very scattergun, but it was obviously something that did speak to me. And so I've got various sort of pictures, just tractors doing stuff and combine harvesters doing stuff. And I kind of, in the back of my mind, is also this idea that people think the countryside stays the same, but actually it's transient, it's moving on all the time. And you look at old photographs, sort of black and white pictures from between the wars of farming scenes, and you think, wow, that's so fascinating. That's how they did it. And you kind of think that needs to be done now, because in 20 years' time, it might well be robots driving up and down the fields, not men in tractors. And we'll be going, wow, they actually had people driving these machines up and down. Some of these modern machines are very impressive. I'm not saying I'm drawn to machinery particularly, but you perhaps can see that, you know, that's a theme that comes through. So, but it's back to, that's documentary photography, and so, you know, that for me, that's an easy draw. That's an easy pull, just recording it and putting it in a portfolio. But it's not taking me on to that more creative level. So I need to sort of pull those two threads together and try and make them intertwine and work together.
Hey, and what's to say that it can't be done? You put a more artistic flair, an expressive flair upon something documentary. You know, we often think of documentary as representational, but what's to say that it can't be something more than that? And maybe
well, some of these wartime photographers have definitely elevated themselves above mere recording, haven't they? And produced pictures that are still immensely powerful now, even though that moment is way, way behind us. So it can be done. Whether I have the skills to do that is another question.
Oh, well, only time will tell. And, you know, you're obviously clearly curious to explore and to carry on experimenting and developing. So who knows? And perhaps there's a couple of project ideas, portfolio ideas that could emerge from your exploratory journey now to, you know, figure out what it is that you would like to do.
Sometimes the figuring out is part of the fun, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think it's all a process of figuring out. Knowing can be what? Sorry?
Well, I was going to say knowing can be a bit dull, really. It's rather like, I keep referring back to sporting metaphors, but I often think of tennis particularly, you know, the likes of Roger Federer, who's won Wimbledon and Grand Slams time after time. What keeps you going after you've made enough money to live on and you're top of
Yeah.
the game and you can win at will? What motivates you to keep doing it? I don't know. Whereas climbing the ladder, starting and working your way up through the thing and finally achieving that win, like I was saying before with the archery, finally a county champion at my great age. It's the improving and the learning and the climbing that are the greatest rewards in my experience anyway. They're much more rewarding than actually winning.
Sure.
With photography and artistry, I don't think that there is an ultimate pinnacle or summit. All you can do is try to keep improving and working towards something and hope that at some point it will all come together and you will hit that sweet spot and produce some real exceptional work. You look at even the very greatest artists, and not everything they did was brilliant, whether it's singers or painters or sculptors, but their top tier half dozen works of art, records, sculptures are of such an immense standard, way beyond what you would think was humanly possible, that they move into that realm of untouchable and immortal, because it's all come together for them in that one person. And, I'm not saying that's going to be me one day, but I'd like to keep working on it, and every now and then things do come together and I do get a picture and I think, yeah, that's good, that's the sort of thing I'm trying to achieve.
Well, it would be great to keep an eye and to see how that then maybe emerges from a photograph to maybe a project, or a theme or an idea, or building upon that idea of a single photograph that means something, maybe a collection of works that means something and says something more.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to your zine. I think that's the sort of I haven't really considered putting something together, but I kind of feel that by doing that, you've produced something that is there for the long term, that shares with people. People who resonate with it will get hold of a copy. And I think that has merit, and it's maybe not something I'm ready to drive towards at the moment. But if things come together with the sort of countryside theme or something of that sort, then yeah, that's something I would look at doing.
Yeah. Well, I wonder how, as you were talking about the countryside, my mind started to throw all sorts of visions. Something like back to the country. Like a kind of one man's journey to return to his roots, to where he feels like he belongs, perhaps, and if that is something you wanted to pursue, I think there could be a beautiful. You mentioned stories to me before. There could be a beautiful story there, which could have some merit with where we currently are in the world, and perhaps needed to reconnect and get back to nature.
Yeah. It's certainly worth thinking about. I mean, I think one of the problems I'm having, as I say, is you start trying to narrow things down, and by doing that, the old fear of missing out starts kicking in. You go, well, but there's nice things over there. What about the coast, and what about architecture, and all these other things that you can take pictures of? But I think at some point one's got to just, if you're going to create a quality body of work, you've got to narrow it down and focus on that.
I certainly feel like there's power and merit in doing that. Yeah, and it's one of the, I mentioned to you, I've noted a few things down, and that was one of them, about the kind of experimentative approach and broad kind of portfolio that you've got going on, where there's hints of perhaps some themes emerging, but then such a diversity of subjects that for me, it would be very difficult to then focus on building something deeper, you know, and from experience, that confinement of I'm just photographing trees this year was incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And that, from my perspective, was where the development started to come, and also the questioning process through that, and the things that I learned about myself through that kind of journey of just photographing one subject was incredibly powerful. So I don't know, maybe there could be something in that for you to perhaps create some structure around creativity. And maybe that would help you to get out some more. I know you mentioned that you struggled, right, over the past year, and you've only been out once.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had similar kind of struggles with creativity and with photography and shifts of focus and whatnot. But yeah, perhaps that could be a way to kind of confine yourself. And that's, you know, we're kind of in similar places with that creativity at the moment, because I've just done the same thing where I've refined and confined myself to say, okay, just focus on this theme of stillness and silence that I've witnessed in my own work so far. So I don't know how that sits with you. Maybe that could be something to explore.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are clearly some practical issues that I need to overcome, which are just lifestyle matters, where just freeing up time to go out with the camera, having a theme to pursue when I'm out. So rather than just going aimlessly, I'm actually pursuing something. The picture of the Highland cattle pleases me greatly, because that was an image that I had in my mind the summer before, and I asked the guy if it'd be all right to go back in the winter, and he okayed it. And I got the picture that I had I had got the picture that I had in my mind 6 months before in the summer, and I felt enormous satisfaction in that I'd had the idea and then gone back and executed it, and was pleased with the result. So there's a bit of that, but I think if you go too far down that route, you get to the point where I've heard a number of photographers, and I think you've said it occasionally yourself, you set out with an image in mind, and I think in landscape photography, it's possibly inevitably going to lead to disappointment, where you have this image of golden sunset and reflections on the lake, and you go out and it's a bit breezy and there's no sun, and you think, I can't take a picture today. So it's not something I do as a rule, but just occasionally I do, and you get something like that and you think, yes, I've achieved what I set out to achieve. I did something similar with a light trail on the motorway. I thought I'd grab the chance while I still live reasonably close to a motorway, and it's not a fantastic picture. It's a good picture of light trails, but it's a satisfying picture to me because I set out to take that picture and I came home with it in the camera. So that has a reward, certainly. If you set yourself a challenge, you go out and you achieve it, and you come back and you've got what you set out to capture. So that, I think, will feed into it as well. So a lot to work on, though.
Oh, lots to work on. Yeah, but at least you're asking the questions, right? And that's the key, I think, along this journey, is to keep asking the questions and to keep searching.
Yeah, some of the questions are a bit too big to answer in one bite, I think. I mean, you say about the why, and I think, yeah, it's only one word, but God, it's a big question, and you can't just answer it in a day. You keep chipping away at it.
Yeah, but you mentioned before about the subconscious, and I think there's power in that, in bringing those questions out into the physical world, into the conscious, and then to allow the subconscious to, just to carry on joining the dots in the background, which I think it does incredibly well. And, all of a sudden, things from my portfolio have certainly started to emerge just from the process of for me, journaling practice, and asking the questions in my journal. And then, I feel like all of a sudden these things emerge that we had no idea were going to happen. And perhaps then that conscious mind can then latch onto it and say, oh, there's something there. There's something in that. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, I use sporting analogies a lot because I think in terms of subconscious, there's a lot of psychology involved there. And in my archery, I have to make my conscious mind focus on one or two parts of the process of shooting, but leave the actual last aiming and release of the shot to my subconscious because it does it so much better. And shutting up the little voice on your shoulder that says you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong, has taken years and years, and sometimes it still comes back. But yeah, you've got to trust your subconscious and let it take over sometimes and see where it leads you. What's the harm anyway? Worst that can happen is you have a out of focus fuzzy picture on your camera. It's not a disaster, is it?
No, I've got plenty of those. And, I think the key is to learn something from those along the way, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And
And
there's,
just
yeah,
one other little thought. You were saying about how sort of you could see I've been experimenting and playing around with things. And recently I had that endorsed. I think it was John Cleese who said that some of the greatest creatives are the people who are prepared to play with the stuff in front of them. They don't stick to the rules. They don't follow the instructions. They go, what happens if I do this? What happens if I
mm,
do that? If I push it this way or push it that way? And, get the sliders on the old processing software and shove it right the way across and see what happens. And point your camera at the sun instead of having it behind you. And I think the willingness to play around with stuff like that, you don't know where it's going to lead, but you might suddenly hit on something and think, oh, actually, yeah, this is something I can work on. And then you can develop that. Might be a whole new technique that becomes your signature.
yeah, yeah, I completely agree. Experimentation is definitely the key with creativity. But then at the same time, it's a fine balance between, are we just, you know, are we missing out by maybe not confining ourselves at the same time? To me, there's a yin yang approach to creativity where it needs some level of both. It needs some discipline, it needs some structure, but it also needs freedom for it to be
Yeah.
at its best. And that's something I've really been thinking a lot about recently, is the 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 importance of discipline for creativity, for the freedom of creativity to evolve and to express itself, if that makes sense.
A strange image just popped into my head then. You were saying that yin and yang. I was thinking of the man on the tightrope with his pole, and then I thought, I feel more like the guy hanging from the tightrope with his hands trying to climb up onto it.
But at least you've still got a handhold on the tightrope, yeah?
Not in free fall yet.
Not yet, no. Tim, one more thing I wanted to draw upon, just before we call it a day now, because it's been just over an hour, so that's about
Yeah, sorry,
good
it's
enough. That's all right. No, no, it's
been a bit longer than you suggested.
I've got time, so it's fine. But I just wanted to draw upon you mentioned the word philosopher. You perhaps saw yourself perhaps with quite a philosophical mind when you were younger, and that's actually something that I had in my mind when kind of coming up with a little bit of a structure to today's call. It was to kind of point out that I feel like you've got a kind of mentor kind of in our relationship anyway, how you've enjoyed those kind of moments when you've been able to offer some thoughts and feedback on my videos when I've opened myself up to that, and also in the personal relationship that we've developed as well. You've enjoyed taking that approach and offering a little bit of insight here and there when I've asked you. So I wonder if there's some elements of that you might find weaving into your creativity at some stage. Is there a desire to, and forgive me now, but you've retired now, so is there an element of wanting to give back a little bit now you're in that stage of life where you want to share a bit of what you've learned?
I think definitely. I think sharing is definitely something I've always seemed to want to do.
Mm,
Not not in the obvious sense. I was never the kid that handed around all this bag of sweets when I was at school, kind of thing. But if I have good fortune, I tend to want to share it, and if I have success, I want to share it. So, like at work, I was very happy to have people tag along behind me, and try and pass on if not the experience, the enthusiasm for what I was doing, and then spark some interest. Give people a help onto the ladder, lift them onto the first rung if I had the chance. I mean, in retirement, you don't get those opportunities so much, but yeah, I mean, in terms of pictures, if I can, it actually does happen. I mean, on Facebook, I've had a lot of people say to me, "Oh, we love seeing your pictures on Facebook." And what I found is that they don't interact with them, they don't click like or anything, but they will say to me when I see them, "Oh, we love your pictures, keep posting them." And I'm thinking, well, I'd stop because I'm not getting any feedback. And then you kind of think, well, actually, you just need to be a bit more altruistic than that. You just post them out there, and if they bring a bit of cheer to somebody, then that's great. And it seems that it happens, but people don't respond to you. They don't pick up the phone or type a comment or leave a message saying, "Wow, that was great. That really gave me a lift. It's been a gloomy day, and your picture cheered me up," or anything of that sort. But it happens, and I think you have to have that belief within yourself that if you produce a nice image and you share it, the people who look at it will derive some benefit from it. It doesn't have to be on a deep level, it can just be a subconscious mood lift. But that's rewarding. And I've almost now got to the point where it's happened a few times. So I'm now thinking, well, I don't actually need people to say to me, "Oh, we like your picture." Just keep putting them out there because people are looking at them and are enjoying them. So just keep doing it. When someone puts a message on saying "stop because I hate your pictures," that might be the time to give it up.
No, that's the time to carry on doing it even more. Because you get
Finally
instant
triggered a
reaction.
reaction.
Yeah, but I think once that, you mentioned about finding a bit more purpose behind them, then I think that's when it just becomes, like a duty to share. You have to do it. But I resonate with you in that, I think we're programmed by the way the world is structured, by digital media, by, very smart people who understand how human attention and psychology works. I think we're programmed now to subconsciously sometimes seek that approval and that validation, those red notifications, and that gives us merit. And I still find myself now sometimes, particularly not so much with the photography now, because I feel like I found my reasons, my why, my my audience, and I feel like my work falls on underneath some eyes and has some merit to it now. But particularly with the written side of things, when I'm sharing some writings now over in other places on Substack and on Threads, and it's falling on deaf ears, not getting a engagement, not getting any. I mean, for me, I'd love if it got more engagement, more comments, more interactions, but at the moment it's not getting much. And there's a little voice in my head that says, "What's the point? You 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 do this to kind of make some difference and to make some shifts in the world, but it doesn't seem like anybody's seeing them." But that purpose is strong inside of me to carry on regardless, and also with the view in mind that I know how the internet works, I know how the world works, and these things take a lot of time to build, and audiences need time to understand and come around. So the purpose is the key behind it all, right?
It's very hard, but I mean, if you suddenly made the breakthrough and you had 1 million people clamoring for your next piece of writing, that would bring a whole new lot of pressures onto you and would probably stop you doing what feels like the right thing to do at that given moment. And you would have to be immensely mentally strong to carry on doing your own thing under pressure from all sorts of external agencies saying, "Well, we need you to write about this, and we need you to write about that, and write about this, write about that, and this is the way you should do it, and that's the way you should do it." And I think the freedom of semi-anonymity at this stage allows you to just express yourself much more freely, and it's a freedom in itself. So yeah, carry on, and one day people are reading it for sure. They're reading it. They might not be commenting, but I bet they're reading it still, and taking something from it more than likely as well. I know I've was probably been a bit too honest in my comments,
I
but
love honesty.
um, I think was it you said someone came up to you and said, "Well, I think you can take it," and I've always felt that you could handle it. And if no one points out to you that your microphone's not working very well or your light's a bit off, you're just going to carry on doing it. So
Yeah,
much better that someone says it and you can do something about it and move up a level than just carry on making the same mistake over
sure.
and over again.
And I've learned in my older years now where and how to channel my sensitivity. And people's words about my microphone isn't enough to break me anymore, like it once might have when I was younger. So yeah, always grateful for your honesty. But just kind of drawing this call to a close now. And the reason I touched upon that theme of the writing was just with that idea of the purpose in mind that you mentioned you were trying to discover now. So I wonder how has this call helped you in that discovery of the why, the grand old question of why?
Well, I think it certainly brought into sharp focus one or two of, what should we call them, the problem areas, obstacles that are in my path that I kind of feel like I'm starting to see a route through. And as is so often the case when you're trying to progress, getting the route through is often involves doing things you don't really want to do. So like narrowing down what I take pictures of is not something I want to do, but I kind of maybe I should. And it's not a forever thing. I mean, if it's not working for me, I can stop doing it. But I need to give it a try for a while, I think, and I need to find something. I think that's the other thing, is finding that thing that gets the juices flowing
Sure.
within that narrow channel, whether that's going to be countryside and that's probably been what my mind's been working on most recently, is what theme would you be prepared to narrow it down to and stick with? And what I've come up with so far has been a bit nebulous. It's like, let's say, landscapes with no sky. Well, that's not really specific enough. And black and white, but that's not specific enough. So I need to come up with a channel that suits me. I think honestly, the only way to do that is go out with the camera and take pictures and go. Yeah, this is what I like taking pictures of. This is where I like to go to take pictures and work it that way. So we come back to the original problem, which I touched on right at the start, which is just not getting out enough with the camera on dedicated photo shoots. I do get out, and most weeks I'm out at some point taking pictures, but I'm reacting to what's light or something that's happening, and I'm recording, documenting, and I need to take more control, not just of the subject matter, but also the when and the where and what I'm actually trying to take pictures of. So there's plenty to work on there. And as you say, I need to probably let the subconscious sort of
Sure.
chew that over and decide exactly what it is that I'd be prepared to
Yeah.
sacrifice everything else for, to dedicate on that one thing.
And what if that theme, so for example, you mentioned black and white, what if that theme wasn't such a technical theme, and what if it was more a feeling, an emotion, a part of you that is trying to emerge and capturing that instead of technicalities?
Yeah. I do like that idea, and I think you mentioned stillness as a theme you used, and yeah, I think that's probably something I could work on. And the reason that I immediately sort of go, "Oh, I like that," is because you've got a theme, but actually you've got no boundaries to
No,
it. Sounds strange. We're talking about narrowing it down. You have narrowed it down, but
but open things up as well.
actually you've opened it
Yeah.
up at the same time.
Yeah, and that theme for me has taken a long time to emerge, and also some intentional but unintentional reflection and, work as well, because I've got my journaling practice, and I think a lot. I love to think, of course, but then also that theme has emerged just through
Yeah.
following
You,
this, the heart.
you
And
look back at your body of work, and it's there, almost right back to the beginning. All your early woodland pictures, your tree pictures, that theme of stillness and peace and meditation is there right from the beginning. Really, it just takes a long time to spot it. And
yeah,
now you have, I think the danger is you try and push towards it instead
yeah,
of carrying on letting it come to you.
yes, that's you're completely right there. In that things have to emerge naturally. I think the best things anyway have to emerge naturally and
I liked
unfold.
your picture of the reeds that you posted the other day
Oh,
with the
thank you.
out of focus coloured water behind it. That's a very Tim type of picture. I mean, that's the sort of thing that I would take. You've got the structure of the reeds and you've got the simple background, but that's stillness all over it, and yet it's a completely different direction from what you normally take.
Very different, and I was glad to see that photograph unfold and reveal itself to me, because I've had my eyes on those grasses for a while, at the foot of a lake that I love so much, but I guess the moment hasn't risen. It's not felt like the right time to create it, but
Uh,
the other day just felt like it was the right time. And there's a hint of motion actually when you see the photograph as well, because there's ripples in the water that you might not have seen on the video that I posted.
I've only seen
Yeah,
a
yeah,
very small thumbnail of it, but yeah, I mean, to me, that's the sort of thing that works because you've got the shape and form. I think they're silhouetted, aren't they? Which again has
just
always
about.
appealed to me for some reason. Um, and although it's not monochrome, it's as near as damn it. It's sort of you've got the background color and you've got the blacks of the foreground. So it's simple, but it says so much. As you say, I mean, it's peace written all over it. And I guess you must have done your usual thing of been sort of sitting for a while, and I can see how that sort of picture emerges. You're sitting, sort of maybe having your sandwich and your cup of coffee, and looking around you, and you go, "Oh, those reeds look nice. Oh, look, that water's just one colour behind it. That looks nice. I wonder if I can get." And then you put your sandwich down and pick your camera up, and before you know it, you're sort of completely
Yeah.
lost in trying to capture what's just caught your eye. And I think some of the best pictures come that way.
Well, thank you. Yeah, you're absolutely right in that I wasn't quite sitting. I'd been out filming actually the Snowdonia video that you are due to watch soon. So
Keenly anticipating.
yeah, I didn't actually put that photograph in because it didn't quite fit with the video, but you know, that's by the by anyway. I'd spent the whole day, spent probably 5 hours outdoors in nature. And like always, it's a process being outdoors of um, kind of dredging the waters, the muddy waters being the mind. The thoughts are there, and I've been very busy in my thoughts over the past year. So actually that process of being out for 5 hours, connecting again with nature and being in the trees, and I guess being back on my core purpose, which is to create photographs and to show the process of that through the education of the YouTube video. So actually that feeling of getting back to that core version of me, which maybe I've ventured away from over the past 12 months, rightly so, it has to happen sometimes. But then at the end of the day, I guess when that water had been dredged, and I was actually very close to being back at the car park, so my adventure was nearly over.
You're right.
That's when that I walked past those reeds, and I just felt like, oh, the time's right. I saw the collection of maybe 6 or 7 that were just bundled together nicely, but each had their own different way and form and direction, and it just worked. It just came to me. But like I said, that section of grasses, I don't know what they actually are. Are they grasses with the very fluffy thing on the end?
There'll be some sort of reed or sedge.
Reed, yeah,
Think,
yeah. But they'd been on my mind for a long time actually to photograph. So we talked about conscious and subconscious. It's been in there somewhere. that I need to create a photograph of these. And then
but then
the time was right.
the light's just right, and it catches your eye, and
It all came together in the moment, but
yeah,
that doesn't happen without getting out there firstly, which was another lesson to me, to get out there.
yeah.
And then to allow all of this, all of this journaling, all of these conversations, life, love, all of these things that have happened in the past 18 months, without those, maybe that moment wouldn't be possible.
Oh, as you say, I mean, it's every picture you take is an accumulation of your life story up to that point, really, isn't it?
Ansel Adams
What
says
interests you?
it.
Eh?
Ansel Adams says it.
Did he?
Ansel
Oh, there you
Adams.
go.
Yeah, one of my favorite
I
quotes.
must be on the right track then.
Yeah. In a similar way.
Yeah, it's true, because I mean, how you view things is totally coloured by your conditioning of life and what it's done to you, and what
Exactly
you've
right.
resisted and what you've hung on to from childhood.
Yeah, right.
I was reading a autobiography of a friend of mine's father. Actually, he grew up in Ireland, and he's lived in Manchester for 60 years. He said, but I still feel Irish. I still feel drawn to my home where I spent the first 13 years, because that's where those are the most formative years, where you have the most influences,
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
that first 13 years pass far slower than any of the subsequent decades.
Yeah.
That's how I feel, and I think that's where that country life thing comes from, because those formative years for me were out in the countryside. And I hear you saying, "Oh, well, I was out for 5 hours, or I need to go out," and I kind of think, actually, out should be your natural
Right.
place,
Right.
and it's almost like, well, I was in today. I
Right.
don't like being in.
Exactly
I'd
right.
rather be out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Out is
Return into
my
nature.
natural habitat.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely. Tim, I'm going to have to call it a day now. I've just
yeah.
clocked the
No,
time and I
that's
need to
been
go and do a
great, Brad.
delivery. So, yeah, thank
Thanks.
you for coming on and, yeah, opening up with such honesty and like having the courage to keep on searching. I think the answers will come.
It hasn't been too bad.
All right.
But no, I've really enjoyed it, Brad, and it's been really helpful bringing one or two things into focus, and possibly just starting me on a direction, a path that will lead who knows where. But
Great
yeah,
stuff.
certainly giving me some stuff to work with. So thanks for that.